Welcome to the Embracing a Disabled Lifestyle podcast. This is your host, James and Jessica Pruitt. We are here to help the families of disabled children live a balanced life and live to the fullest. Here's your host, James and Jessica Pruitt. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Embracing a Disabled Lifestyle podcast. This is your host, James Pruitt. We're back for episode number 6 of the Embracing a Disabled Lifestyle podcast. And now, hi Jessica.
Hi James. Hi everybody.
Man, this has been a pretty interesting week. We've had a lot of stuff going on. Thank you everybody who supported us last week as we launched the podcast. We pushed a lot of stuff out, so really appreciate everybody who's been supporting us and sharing the podcast and everything. So now we're going to be recording or sharing the podcast once a week, every Friday at 9 a.m. So we are working on getting it listed in iTunes and other podcasting directories so that you can subscribe and follow along. But for now, over the next couple of weeks, we wanted to talk a little bit about family and your family dynamics. The first part of your family that you need to focus on is your marriage and your relationship with your partner, because if that relationship isn't working, then the rest of the family isn't going to work. Wouldn't you agree?
I totally agree. I think then the whole family will just kind of sort of fall apart.
Yep, and we've seen that happen time and time again. You know, I see a lot of relationships with other families that have split. One of the things that we have found is that families of disabled kids have one of the highest divorce rates.
Yes, and I can actually understand why.
Yeah. Well, I mean, our marriage has not been perfect. Definitely not.
No.
So we're not, high and mighty. We are actively working on solving some really major problems in our own marriage, which we'll go into deeper later. But some of the things that we're talking about today is because these are things that we've learned through our experience and things that we are working on. So one of the things that I think is as you get into this, we started growing apart.
Yes, we did.
And we decided we had to get on the same page. We had to get back to working together to do things.
I totally agree with that. And I think that it all bases is sometimes you do kind of drift apart a little bit. Well, probably a lot, to be honest with you, especially if you're having to deal with a disabled daughter or son or anybody with a disability. You can find that your marriage is what you thought was strong is really not as strong as you think it was.
That's true. And we had some major problems with different things. We've grown apart over time. I know for me, some of it started kind of coming about. We keep talking about the Families for Hope conference, but it's because that conference was such an eye-opener for both of us. But one of the things that we talked about in the dads group that you weren't a part of, but when we had the dads session and the dads were all talking, one of the things that we discussed was coming together as a family to raise our child. And that this is something that a lot of the dads evidently have been through as well, from what we were talking about in that group discussion. But one of the things that we talked about was serving your family in the best way you can, and you can't do that if you don't resolve your differences in your marriage.
Correct, and we've been trying very hard to resolve some of those issues that we were having. And sometimes it's a daily.
Oh, it is a daily thing. It's something you have to focus on. It's not something that you're going to work on one time and it's going to be solved. It's something you have to intentionally work on. You have to intentionally, decide what you want. One of the things that I talk about in so much of the stuff that I do online is having, a purpose and a plan and a clear direction of where you want to go. And your marriage is no different. You need to know, and you need to both know and have an agreement of what kind of marriage you want. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And I also think that you need to decide, each of you on your own, whether or not you want to pursue going and staying in your marriage. And really, really think about, do you want to fight for it, or do you just want to walk away? And I know for some people, the answer is that they want to walk away. My answer was I did not want to walk away. I wanted to fight, not just for us, but for my family.
True. But then if you do decide that, which, we've been working on that, but if you decide that you want to save your marriage and you want to work on your marriage, then you have to sit down together and really define some clear goals and define what kind of a marriage you want. Because one of the things I always say is, if you want to go to the grocery store, you got to know where the grocery store is. You want to get there. And it's the same is true in your marriage. If you want your marriage to be at a certain place, you have to know where that is. You have to know where you want to go.
And don't be afraid of talking to your spouse about it either. I mean, I think that's the number one thing that kind of can happen, is that you're afraid, to bring this out to your spouse because you're afraid of either starting a fight and that it's going to kind of upset them, but I think the number one thing is you need to leave that communication open. Once you lose the communication, there's going to be a lot of problems.
True. One of the biggest obstacles, which we'll talk about later, but is communication in your marriage. But right now I want to kind of talk about why it's important. So you have to get back together. If you don't spend time on your marriage, you're going to grow apart. You're not going to be making decisions together. You're not going to be making decisions that go in the same direction. You're going to make decisions that are contradictory to each other, which leads to even further breakdown in your marriage.
And hurt feelings.
And then you have, we are, working with families of disabled kids. So you're going to have childcare decisions to make. And how are you going to make those childcare decisions if you're not communicating, if you're not working together? One of the things with having clear goals is you have to clearly define amongst each other what are your goals for your child and what are you working on and working towards with your child. We had a lot of arguments and fights and things over the feeding issues. And some of it came down to we weren't on the same page as far as where we were trying to go. We have had issues with the GJ tube. We had issues with putting her on the feeding tube. And a lot of it came down to not being on the same page and not clearly communicating with each other in a positive way where we wanted to go. Is that true?
Yeah, I would say so. And not really listening to what each other was trying to say or taking their point of view. I think once we can see where the other person is coming from, maybe it might lead to a better understanding, because I may have a different view than what James has, and James has a different view from what I have. But if we both kind of listen and kind of sort of talk it out, sometimes when you talk those things out, you will find that you have a better answer. You might have a better answer than what you thought, and sometimes I think of things differently than James does, and vice versa. And he's like, what, that makes sense. And sometimes I'm like, what you just said made sense to me. I understand. I can't be thinking this way. I need to think the other way. So I think if you can leave that open for your child and without trying to start an argument, I think that would probably be one of the best things. And yes, I do think that, James.
True. And then one of the other things you have to look at that we were talking about is the behaviors you're modeling for your other children. If you have other kids, then, as you work on your marriage, as you what you do in your marriage, the way you interact with each other, is going to influence your other children in their concept of what a marriage should be like. So, think about what your other kids are. What kind of a marriage would you like to see them have as they grow up? What kind of problems would you like them to avoid? And model the behaviors that you want to see out of them through your own actions. And I have to be point blank honest. I have not always been the best model for Hunter of what a father should be like, what a husband should be like. And I have to own that. I have to accept responsibility for that and try to do better, which is what I'm doing. I'm trying to do better at, being a better father figure, but also a better husband in how I deal with you and how I deal with him. And, because I don't want him to grow up to think that, you should, treat your wife the way I have been at times.
Thank you for that. I do agree. I think that you do have to remember and that you have children that can hear everything that's going on, whether they're small, older. You want to always try to put. I know sometimes it's going to get you're going to lose your temper. You're just going to lose your temper. But for the most part, try to take it away from your children. Don't even talk about it inside the house. If you have to, take it outside, and have the conversation outside, because you have those little peeping ears that like to listen to what everything's going on. I know I do, and mine's 16 years old. So, and I cannot say that there hasn't been times where James has said something and I've seen it come right back at my face coming from my 16-year-old. I can tell you that it's never good to have them hear you arguing, because it scares them. I mean, it scares my 4-year-old. And, there's some times where he's like, Jessica, keep your voice down. And I'm like, James, keep your voice down. And it's kind of hard when you're getting into arguments to do that kind of stuff, but we do try.
Yeah, we're trying. One of the things that I talk about all the time is, is it better now than it used to be? And it's not about, fixing everything overnight and everything being perfect and hunky-dory all the time, but it's about, is it overall better now than it used to be? I think right now we are better than we used to be. We still have a long way to go to where we want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, these are some of the biggest reasons I think why it's important to focus on your marriage. And, what are some of the roadblocks that we have as families? I actually wrote a few of these down. I could have a whole list of them, and we could probably go for days on just these roadblocks to a successful marriage. But I just got 3 of them real quick that I wanted to talk about. So the first one I want to talk about is finding time together without the kids around, and especially when you have a disabled child. This is one of the biggest things I see a lot of families do. They never spend time with just the 2 of them. And we got to a place where we were doing that.
And we still kind of do. I mean, like right now, I guess you could say that this is us spending some time together. But I agree with James. You need to find some kind of time and put down those cell phones, because I can tell you that that's one of my husband's big peeves. And it's funny because it's one of his big peeves, but it's one of mine too. I can glance over and he's on his cell phone on Facebook, and he's like, Jessica, you're always on the phone. And that's kind of how we kind of sort of drifted apart to begin with. And to be honest with you, do you really want your kids modeling that? I mean, I was at a dinner earlier where, no offense, but my nephews were on their cell phones. And usually it's not, that wasn't really rude because, they're with grown-ups. So, but just imagine your son or your nephew or whoever is on a cell phone on a date with somebody. I find that's very rude. So that may be something that you may want to touch on later, but they're only seeing what you're doing. So like if you're on the cell phone and they see you doing that, then they think, okay,
yeah,
So that's basically what I'm saying. My son does the same thing too. So
Yeah, in this technology culture, we've kind of gotten ingrained into this habit of, going to our technology, and sometimes you got to unplug a little bit,
I do.
and pull away from it and just spend some time together as a family, and as a couple specifically. You've got to spend some time, and you need to be able to communicate with each other, with what's going on. And you have to understand each other's language and those kind of things. One of the biggest areas, and this kind of leads into that, is we all have different beliefs and different values. And when you come together in a marriage, you have to blend those different beliefs and values. And that's something we didn't do, and it created a ton of conflict between the two of us because we had some different beliefs. We had different cultural beliefs, different cultural values, because you grew up in this Hispanic culture, and I grew up,
We're very family oriented. Very.
Well, it's not just about being family oriented, but it's in, values in your money systems and how you financial planning and values in different things. And, as we've learned and grown, we've grown different beliefs, and we've grown kind of apart in some of our beliefs and values even throughout the relationship.
Yeah.
So we really have to sit down, and this is something we still have to do, but sit down and talk about our beliefs and our values about the things that are important to us. This is part of that, finding the direction you want your marriage to go. What kind of values and beliefs do you want to represent in your marriage? And can you get on board with each other as far as, sharing some common values and common beliefs?
And we do have some common values and common beliefs, but we also have some very different ones too.
Yes. And I think that's what happens with a lot of relationships. A lot of relationships start off and it's all about, attraction and, how much fun you have together. But most marriages, including ours, don't start off by sitting down and talking about what are your beliefs and values and goals and dreams and where do you want to end up and how do you plan on getting there. And I think if you do that before you get into the relationship, you have a much stronger foundation than if you wait until years later like we're doing.
Well, we did touch on some before we got married, James. I think probably the core ones. But I do agree with you, and I do agree that maybe you should have that kind of a sit down and talk, because I can tell you that some of my beliefs have come in the way of Emily's childcare. And I'm not talking about like that I would never have her visit a doctor or something, but a good one that he mentioned was GJ. I had a real struggle going on the GJ just because in my belief, I believe that God made us the way that he wanted us to be. Because she has problems throwing up, but if he didn't want her throwing up, then he would have like taken that out of everybody. And is it really good not to throw up? I mean, really? I mean, where is that all going? Is it empty? I mean, is it good? Is it poisoning your system? I mean, I have lots of questions that maybe the doctors can or cannot answer. So, and sometimes that will put a stop to the care that your child might be getting. And sometimes that's where listening to your spouse and saying, well, look, it's either between that or her starving to death because she's not keeping anything down. I mean, sometimes it takes a wake up call like that to kind of sort of push you in the direction that you need to go. I can tell you that was a major, major issue.
That was a major wake-up call, but sometimes it's, we have to discuss where we want to go, what we're trying to do, when it comes to even small decisions. Yes. One of the things I found is major, major problems in people's lives. Most people see these really big, huge problems that they feel like that they can't overcome. And I kind of been in this place myself. But then I started really looking at it. It's not really one big, huge problem, but it's more like a tiny little problems. And then those tiny little problems compound and add up to make the big problems. So when you start breaking down to seeing, where are the really little things that we can work on, then it starts solving the big issues.
Right. And I like to touch base with James when it comes to Emily's childcare, because he has a decision in it. And sometimes I like to know that, hey, I'm making the right decision. I just don't go off and say, you know what, we're doing this and that's it. I cannot say that I haven't made some decisions like nursing care. He kind of leaves that kind of up to me. But when it comes to doctors and surgeries and stuff, me and him always talk about what kind of plan of care. And I think that's very important as a couple to discuss these kind of things and not just the dad make a decision. I can't say that the other day he didn't make a decision that I kind of was like, really didn't like the decision he made, especially since I wasn't really consulted in it, or I may have been, but I didn't hear the whole conversation. So I kind of felt like I was left out of the whole conversation of this specific topic. But, his view was different than mine, and that's where the views that we are talking about come in handy. I know where he was coming from, though, and that's what counts. So, I took that into account when this problem did arise, or the situation arose. So I really think that you need to keep and not just make that decision on your own. You need to just talk to your spouse, because like he said, there could be some hurt feelings in between there. And I don't think he meant to hurt my feelings. He was just making a decision based off of her health on what was best for her. And you've got to remember that, but you've got to also remember to touch base with your spouse on even the littlest things, because you just never know. Something that doesn't seem so big, big could turn out bigger than you thought. What do you think, James?
That's true. We do make sometimes decisions, but sometimes you have decisions that have to be made in the heat of a moment that you don't have time to sit down and discuss.
That's true.
And sometimes this is where pre-planning, looking ahead, and kind of knowing what different things could come up, it gives you a chance to, do some research and educate yourself before you get into the middle of a crisis, instead of trying to rush research while you're in the middle of a crisis. But
kind of like finding out the diagnosis of holoprosencephaly semi-lobar.
Right. I mean, we had no clue. We didn't know. But once you have the diagnosis, then you need to, we'll learn what that means, and learn, and then make decisions together on what you're going to do. And sometimes you have to contemplate things separately and then come together and sit down and discuss it.
Yes, and don't take everything that you read on the internet as fact and fiction, fact, because if I had taken everything that I read on the internet about holoprosencephaly, I probably would have had a mental breakdown. And they really need to update the internet, basically.
Well, yeah. I mean, some of that stuff, once it's up there. It's not going anywhere. But, yeah, it's true. You got to verify your research and stuff. Mm-hmm. But as far as talk to your spouse, talk to other people, when you're making these decisions, but you've got to come together on the same page and look at, discuss, okay, where does this fit in my values, and where does this fit in our family's values and our family's beliefs as to what direction we choose to take together. Once you have those, this is where, again, back to defining your different values and your beliefs, and what the values and beliefs you want your family to stand for become important. Because once you define those, and what you want your family's beliefs and values to be, then it's going to guide the decisions that you do have to make in those heat of the moment decisions, without having time to sit down and have a full out discussion on it.
And guys, some of these decisions might go against your beliefs. I mean, some of mine have, and sometimes you have to stay strong with what you've decided versus your what you believe. And believe me, it's pretty hard sometimes.
Well, sometimes part of growth is about changing beliefs that no longer serve you. Sometimes we have to face beliefs that we've held on to and say that belief might have been good for me in my youth and in my early adulthood, but as I'm older and I'm facing different experiences, those beliefs no longer serve my best interest or my family's best interest. And that's something that you'll have to come to terms with as you grow. Because you're going to grow. Growth is part of life. Growth is part of what we do as we learn. Every experience we have contributes to our personal growth and to our growth as a family. And if you really want to be the most successful family that you can, then you need to, learn from those experiences together and kind of come to terms with what they mean to you as a family.
Right. And so I think the number one person you need to talk to, even over others, is your spouse. Keep that communication open.
Keeping that communication open. And it kind of leads me to the third roadblock that I wanted to talk about real quick is stresses from outside the relationship. And that includes, all these things about your medical care decisions. But it also includes, you're going to probably, if you're like me and everybody else I know, you're probably going to get tons of suggestions and advice on your relationship from outside sources and from people that are not involved in your relationship. And there are stresses outside. Things that go on at work are going to affect what I bring home. Same true the other way. Things that go home are things that are going to affect what I do at work.
And I agree with you, James. And not just in there, like he said, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to give you advice, even though and they're trying to do what's best for you, but they don't live it. They're not here with it. They only hear one side of every story. Remember, there's always two sides. So where I can put the blame on him, he can put the blame on me, but there's always two sides of, kind of like the beliefs. There's, we have two different views of everything. So instead of taking it to somebody else, I believe that you should just nip it in the bud and just take it to your spouse.
True.
It's when you start going outside of there that there tends to be a lot of problems. I think me and him both need to work on it a little bit more.
That's good advice, not just for marriage, but just relationships with people in general. I think if you have a problem with somebody, you need to deal with that problem between you and that person, not between you and everybody else and
right,
not discuss it with that person.
And I know it's going to be hard because some of y'all have family members like I do, and y'all take it to your family members. But if you're in a marriage like me and James are, and like he said, you need to take it, any relationship, you need to take it to that person if you have a problem with it. And I think I was always scared that he would leave me or whatever.
Right. Well, I didn't do too much to help with that fear. I haven't been the best husband, and I'm better now than I used to be, but I'm not where I want to be yet. But we take stresses and we talk to other people outside of our marriage that don't understand our situation, that are not really here. They don't see both sides of it, just like Jessica said. But we also, if you're we're living this lifestyle where we have a disabled child, and every decision that we make in our marriage and in our other areas of our lives have to take into consideration her.
Yes.
Because she's kind of the center of everything, even though there is more to life than her disabilities, which is kind of the focus of what we're trying to get people to understand. But at the same time, everything that we decide outside of her affects her and her care. So we have to keep that focus in mind. And the people that we're turning to for advice are not necessarily facing that situation. So,
and you don't want to ostracize your spouse by not sticking up for them either. So, because some of those conversations could lead to where you're like, if you're upset and you're talking to somebody like that, it could lead to where that person is disrespecting your spouse. And whether you're mad at your spouse or not, whether I agree with my spouse or not, you should always stick up for your spouse, whether you agree with them or not. Now, if they're out of line, you don't want to tell them they're out of line in front of the other person. You take it privately and just tell them, hey, I really kind of agree with that other person, but I'm sticking up for you because you are my spouse, and I didn't want to, I know it could be hard, but I mean, you just got to understand that sometimes it could seem like you're siding with the other person instead of with your spouse, and that could also cause some hurt feelings. I'm not saying it's been done or anything in our relationship. It may have, but I feel that the number one thing is to back your spouse no matter what, whether you agree with them or not, and just take it to another level if it really bothers you that much, to let them know. You keep that communication open, because they're not going to know.
All right. And I think we've covered some really great stuff today. We can take all this a whole lot deeper. Each one of these we could probably do a full episode on. But we're running out of time today. But I really wanted to stress, the whole purpose of what we were talking about today is to stress how important it is to work on your marriage, to work on your relationship. If you want to keep your marriage alive and overcome the struggles of living this disabled lifestyle, then you need to focus time and focus effort. It's not going to happen on its own. It's only going to happen if you do it intentionally and if you sit down and work together to create the relationship that you want. And I hope that we have inspired some people to look at their relationship and look at what do they want out of their relationship, rather than just going at it by random chance. Nothing that's worthwhile in life happens by random chance. It only happens when you do it with intention and with a specific outcome in mind. And in your marriage, you have to come to an agreement of what that specific outcome is.
Right. Y'all made vows. We all made vows. So.
Yeah, we all made vows to do these things. And, if you want to stay true to those vows and stay true to that marriage, then you have to come on board with each other. So we had a really great discussion. We're a couple of minutes over today. Next week, we're going to talk more about the rest of your family. So if you wanted to get that straight, you really need to work on your marriage first. So take these things that we've talked about today, start looking at your marriage, and start making steps in the right direction to improving your communication and your understanding of each other. And next week, we're going to talk about your relationship with your other kids outside of the disabled child, and what you can do to start improving your relationships, and how to find time to spend with your other kids, and how to make sure that their needs are met, and how to teach them how to be maybe more open and understanding to other families or other people, because you never know, they may wind up, especially if there's genetic factors involved, they may wind up having a disabled child if there's a genetic factor in your child's disabilities. And so help them to learn early on so that they don't have to go through some of the same struggles you've gone through. So we'll talk about that more next week. Thanks so much for joining us today. For the show notes to today's show, as well as some resources that might be able to help you with working on your marriage, go to disabledlifestyle.com /006, or you can go to edlpodcast.com /006 and find the show notes for today's episode, as well as links to some resources that are going to help you work on your marriage.
And y'all have a happy holidays.
Yeah, this is Thanksgiving week. Thanksgiving, will be tomorrow, because we're actually recording this on Wednesday, but for those of you listening to this, when we publish it on Friday, it'll be yesterday. So I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Y'all enjoy your Black Friday weekend. I'll be at work most of the time. But y'all have a great time, and we'll see you next time.